Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Hey, do you have an idea for a podcast but don't know where to start? Or do you have an already existing podcast that you want to take to the next level? Well, check out WeKnowPodcasting.com. From concept development to theme music to editing to logos, WeKnowPodcasting.com is a one-stop shop for all things pod. Don't hesitate to hit us up. We're very nice.
There's a party each and every year on Christmas Eve, where the fun and cocktail shrimp don't seem to end. Clark and Ralphie taking turns on the TV screen, laughing, singing, yelling with all of our friends. Well, it's Christmas, and let the parties go spread the holiday cheer.
Hey, Dylan.
Hey, Matt.
I don't know what's happening this February and March, but we've got another person joining us on the show this week.
I think we finally realized that people are just sick of hearing us talk about stuff that it doesn't relate to Christmas.
No. You're like, hey, one time I was driving and listening to Real Big Fish's Turn the Radio Off on my way to my parents' Christmas party, and now I need to listen to Real Big Fish every Christmas. Can we get an episode out of that?
Yeah. Dude, I'm telling you, the Scream episode worked. The first two movies came out in December.
All right,
Scream 5 is a Christmas
movie.
Have,
Dylan? You can die on that hill. Tell the people who we've got joining us.
We are here with the writer of probably one of our favorite new Christmas movies, 8-Bit Christmas, and he wrote the original book as well. Kevin Jakubowski, thank you for joining us.
Almost. Jakubowski.
Almost I knew it. And that's why Matt told me to do it. That is 100% why Matt told me to do it.
Matt screwed you. Matt screwed you on that one.
Dylan screwed Dylan. Kevin, obviously I had 8-Bit Christmas was already on my radar, the movie. And I was like, I feel like I've heard that title before because I'm a longtime Geekscape fan, and you had been on Geekscape like almost a decade ago, it feels like, to promote the original book. Yeah. And then you were back on the show talking about the movie. And I think I was halfway through watching that episode live, and you basically talked about how Christmas Story isn't just your favorite Christmas movie. It is your favorite movie, period, end of sentence. And I texted John and was like, we want Kevin on Christmas 365.
Yeah. That's great.
He's our people.
That's great. Yeah, no, it definitely is my favorite movie of all time. And yeah, Christmas movies are just great. I'm psyched to find a podcast where that's what you guys talk about. We're like-minded folk.
So, I mean, obviously the influence of Christmas Story, I think everybody has called it out with 8-Bit Christmas, but there's what are some of the other stuff when you were making this movie that you were pulling from beyond, obviously, your love of Christmas Story and your love of video games, but there's so much happening in this movie. There's so many different stories being told, and what were some of the major influences when you were going into this?
Yeah, I mean, A Christmas Story for sure. I think more than anything, it's just kind of my childhood growing up. I think that's where most of it comes from. And then, once you are able to touch on your own specific childhood, you realize, how similar maybe many other people had it. I mean, the Nintendo, certainly for that time, I try to explain it to people if they weren't a kid in the 80s or early 90s. Like, Nintendo was just so big. It had its own cereal. You know what I mean? Like, that's how big it was. Like, the PlayStation doesn't have its own cereal. You know what I mean? Like that's how big it was, and how big it was to the pop culture of kids. And So I just really thought that I could hang a movie on that. I could hang a movie on that phenomenon that every kid has always wanted something for Christmas, and from there just kind of snowballed into all the things that I thought were funny or just enjoyed thinking about. Having a retainer as a kid, or what the dynamic was in my house around Christmas, or what it was like to grow up in the Midwest, and so all those things kind of work their way in there. And then when you start thinking about it structurally, or how it would work as a movie, then you start seeing how other movies did it, and A Princess Bride did a great job of storytelling that way. And, that was a cornerstone for me, as to, how you'd be able to look back sort of in an organic way of looking back at your childhood, and the storyteller aspect just allows you to tell a much more colorful story. It doesn't have to be completely accurate from a timeline standpoint or from a reality standpoint. You can really have lots of fun with it that way. So Princess Bride was a big influence, A Christmas Story, and my childhood, throwing a little John Hughes there. I think that's the recipe.
So I watched this with two friends pretty much the night it premiered. We got together and we watched it. My friend Lauren is both a dog lover and a children's librarian. So
Oof.
there's a moment that happens in the movie that obviously startled her for a little bit.
Yes.
And then everything's revealed to be okay.
Yes.
And she was like, I'm going to order the book for the library and read it. And I get a text message from her like on Monday. And she's like, the book arrived. And then on Tuesday, she texts me and goes, I'm starting to think the dog doesn't make it in the book. And then I get a text on Wednesday and goes, this book really made me sad about dogs.
Oh. Tell her I apologize. That was one of the first things at the studio, when Warner Brothers bought the script. They were like, okay, we have some notes, and they always have notes. And I was like, I know exactly what their first note's going to be. The dog has to live. And sure enough, that was their first note, which was fine. But to their credit, we were, anytime you get a note from a studio or an executive or whoever, you always have that, at least I do have their initial reaction. Like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
If
this was 8-bit Halloween, they wouldn't have given you that note.
Right, that's true.
We're supposed to feel good.
Yeah, they kill dogs all the goddamn time in the Halloween movies. Yeah.
But then you're able to hopefully make it better. So I think we had our cake and were able to eat it too, where we just were able to delay whether he dies or not. You think he dies, but you get that joke and the severity of it. Because if you don't have something as severe as a dog dying, to me, you can't. It's not even remotely believable that parents would go crazy enough to try to ban Nintendo. So you need something as severe as that, and ridiculous as that, to have a ridiculous response. So the dog has to die, in my opinion. He has to die to let that happen. But
it does. I mean, it's true. I think the movie version of that, it's like, the dog didn't die,
right.
But
right.
Seeing that moment, I think it's done perfectly, because it's long enough to where when we were watching it here, it's like, holy shit, did they just kill that dog?
Right. Well, that's good to hear that you thought it was long enough, because I do think it worked and was honestly funnier,
definitely.
Because then you got to have jokes about the dog and casts and, and
a dog in a cast is always funny. I hate to say
dog
it,
in
but
a
it
cast
kind of is.
I didn't think it would be that. To the director's credit, and everybody that made those pictures, I was like, I don't know, man. Is that going to read? Is that going to play? Huge laughs. I was totally wrong.
It does.
Everybody loved it. Yeah.
And I think. Sorry,
go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah.
I think what I love about 8-Bit Christmas, and Matt and I have talked about this before, is much like A Christmas Story, where I'm a huge fan as well. And people in my family are like, how can you sit here and watch this for 24 hours? Like, how can you watch this over and over again? I think what's unique about a movie like A Christmas Story or about 8-Bit Christmas is it is one big cohesive story, but it's also like split up into bits.
Yeah, it's almost like sketch comedy with a plot. Yeah.
Exactly. And I love that. I love like the mother being a teacher, because I'm a teacher as well. I love her waiting for the snow day. and her being just as pissed, if not more pissed,
Yeah.
than the kids when they don't get a snow day. And I love the rip on the Power Glove, where it's like they're so like excited for this kid to have the Power Glove, and I'm sitting there watching this. I'm like, the Power Glove kind of sucks. Are they gonna talk about that? And they do. Like it's little stuff like that. I think that's what makes a movie like this and movies like A Christmas Story, because they are unique. There's not a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
Enjoyable, and they don't get old. Is that feeling that it is kind of sketch comedy, but in a cohesive story.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I think, there's just lots of little vignettes that are true to life, and certainly I think even more so to its credit, to be honest, A Christmas Story has more of that. And it's just small storytelling, and that feels real, and that feels grounded, and I think people relate to that, and I think A Christmas Story especially, it's never trying too hard.
No,
and to me that's great writing, and that's why Gene Shepard's a genius in my book. It's just little stories, and they trust themselves, and it's great to have those little moments. So I'm glad to hear you connected with some of them in 8-bit.
So, look, people can say that this is recency biased, and I totally understand that. I don't. I enjoy Christmas Story quite a bit. It's not my favorite movie of all time, like one of you, and I really don't watch it for 24 straight hours on Christmas Day, like another one of you. So, what I'll say is that I remember when I watched 8-Bit Christmas and it was over, I looked at my friends and said, I would watch this 10 times before I watch Christmas Story. I genuinely think that and I think it's also because, like, Christmas Story is about a time that I wasn't alive for.
Yeah.
8-Bit Christmas is about a time that I connect with. But I genuinely think that the jokes are so solid and so relatable. And I told everybody to check out this movie when it came out. And it looks like, from what I've heard, a lot of people listened to us because it seemed like it did really, really well. So the question on everybody's mind is, will there be a 16-bit Christmas?
Yeah, first, thanks for, spreading the word, guys, and everything. Cause I think this is, it is HBO Max and it is a bigger movie, but word of mouth is what makes it or breaks it. So thank you for spreading the word. I hope so, to be honest. Like, I can't get into it too much, but I hope so. Let me just
it's not off the table, is what you're saying.
No, it's not. I mean,
they didn't say it did so bad we're going to bury this and never let anyone see it.
It did fantastic. It was their number one, movie. It did of actually all time, direct to HBO Max. So it did really, really well. So they're really excited about it. We're really happy with it. Creatively, I would love to stay with these characters. I would love to see what Christmas, a couple years down the road is for them. And I know exactly what I want that to be. It's a question of, if it all works out. So I would love that. I love these characters and this world, and it would be a lot of fun to revisit it.
See, and I need that, man. I know Matt was just talking about, like, he identifies with this one because it hit his childhood. I'm the young buck, man. I was born in 92, so I need that 16-bit or 32-bit Christmas.
Gotta get
for
it
sure.
For you. Gotta get it for you, for sure. For sure.
So,
I hope so.
So in a weird connection to a previous episode that we just had, right? We had our friend Word Burglar on here, a Canadian nerdcore rapper. We got into a little bit of conversation about gaming because he currently holds the Nintendo Power high score for the game Narc, and got very excited when Narc appeared in 8-Bit Christmas. But it made me think of something. I think one of the things that we jokingly poked fun about in our episode was, you were talking about how Nintendo was bigger than life. It had its own cereal, it had its own magazines. But I think it also comes with this IP that it keeps very close to its chest.
Yeah.
Which I think is why a game like Narc does get to appear in this movie. What was it like trying to fight for the licensing for any of the Nintendo stuff, let alone like anything tied to the big guns of the Nintendo system?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think, it's so funny, and I say this all the time, but any movie that gets made is really a minor miracle. Like, there are just so many things that you just don't think about, that first a corporation has to decide that this script is worth spending $27 million on. I mean, they have to first, that's huge hurdle number one. You know what I mean? Like, so that's kind of a problem. And then, you get into legal things like with Nintendo. So Warner Brothers had bought the script the deal was being worked out. But one of the big things was, what about Nintendo? We'll need the rights, right? And so, the movie's already been shot, so I think we're in the clear. But the question was, do we ask? And if we ask for permission, if they say no, we can't make this movie. There's no there had been floated to me well, maybe we could just make it, a generic system. I was like, I'm not doing the movie if it's a generic system. Yeah. It doesn't work. It would be horrible.
Yeah. Are you sure this can't be Sega CD Christmas?
Right. It just couldn't. I can't think of an analogy off the top of my head, but there's just no way it would work. So luckily the legal department at Warner Brothers felt really confident that as long as we didn't show Nintendo in some disparaging way, or that Nintendo, it used to be, there was the through line, just sort of the chant was Nintendo no, or we were very specific with using Nintendo as the language, and then we had to switch it to something like video game over, which is funnier, I think, because it wasn't specific about Nintendo, saying Nintendo did something bad to these children. It was video games in general. So you had to make little tweaks like that. And if you did that, then you could use the system, and you could show the system, and you could reference the system, because I think at this point it's basically like public domain. Nintendo is its own thing. And so they were able to sort of clear that and come to an agreement, at least legally, with themselves, that we could use Nintendo if we made those changes. And so that was really good. That was a big sigh of relief for me. And then it came down to the games. I had written scenes where there are lots more games, or at least montages of just some of the famous games. When Jake first comes down there and sees the Nintendo in his mind, every cool thing from every game just fired off in his head, and it was great. And you got a good sense of what the games look like and everything. But as you guys probably know, Nintendo owned most of their games. It would have that Nintendo stamp of approval, so they own those games. And so we couldn't ask for those games as well, on the side, we're doing this movie, but we just want these games. If you brought it up with Nintendo at all, they would either say yes or no and either let you or shut down the whole movie. Yeah. So we had to find games that were not owned by Nintendo. And so the games that we used in the movie were either made up, or then we created ourselves, or they were owned by Warner Brothers. So Rampage and Paperboy are two Warner Brothers games. I think they own not Activision, Suncoast. I can't remember the name of the company, but they own those games. So those were games that we were able to use.
Nice.
But legally, it was a tightrope to walk, just in terms of what we could use. So people are always kind of complaining, Mario's not even in that movie. And my answer is yeah, I know, I wish it was, but we couldn't.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the things we got into in our review, and I think that was the overall conclusion that we came to, was listen, it's got to be difficult to get a hold of Mario or Zelda, already working with Nintendo as a whole, and then you're asking for more. So
hey, can we have your biggest icon as well?
Exactly.
Use it and do what we want with it. Yeah.
But no, I think it worked. I think it really worked, man.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
If you're an athlete, the greatest motivator of all is the fear of letting your teammates down. After all, a team is only as good as its weakest link. So you owe it to those wearing the same jersey as you to be your best every time you step on the field. That's why there's no vape in team. When you vape, you can expose your lungs to toxic chemicals that can damage your lungs. If you're a step behind, the team's a step behind. Brought to you by The Real Cost and the FDA.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
So obviously we'll take Christmas Story off the table. What are some of the other, it's December, let's say it's December 20th. What movies if you haven't watched them by now, are you like making sure that you've got some time in your schedule to sit down and watch as your yearly viewings?
That's good because I mean, there's so many great ones. I think for me, the other two big ones are "It's a Wonderful Life" and "Home Alone." I think Home Alone for me. I think I was probably 9 or 10 when it. Let's see, 9. Yeah,
it was 90. Yeah.
Yeah, so 10 or 11 when it came out. Which is roughly the same age as Kevin McAllister. It's set in Chicago. My name is Kevin. Like I was like, this movie is just written for me. Like at 10 years old, I was like, this is my movie. So I saw it twice in the theaters. I love that movie. I love the music in it. I love the way it looks. I love all the little Chicago references. Like I would watch that over and over as a kid. So that's definitely one of my favorites. And I'm just a huge John Hughes fan, just as a writer. He's one of my favorites. So Home Alone for sure, and then It's a Wonderful Life, which is just
it's a flawless script. It's It's a Wonderful Life. It's just a perfect film.
It is a perfect film, and it's perfect because it's a very adult story.
Yeah.
It's about a man who's thinking about killing himself. I mean, when you break it down, that's what it is, and it's thinking about if your life has any meaning or not, and coming to the conclusion of what really matters. And it's a beautiful love story. I mean, it's a wonderful movie. It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah. So yeah, it's those two.
Over the years, I've definitely found myself falling in love with more and more and more of those old black and white classics. The original Miracle on 34th Street, and even like kind of lesser known ones like The Bishop's Wife and stuff. Just like, there's something magical about, I do another podcast called Before My Time that's all about celebrating proper like films and music that came decades before we were born. And we just did an episode on Singing in the Rain where we talked about how there's such a comfort to watching these like golden era films where it's just like, they don't make, like, you'll never see a movie that looks like that authentically ever again.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's so weirdly comforting. How excited were you as a huge Home Alone fan to find out that pretty much the two big new Christmas movies that dropped last year was 8-Bit Christmas and a new Home Alone movie? And I think on every possible level, 8-Bit Christmas walked away the winner of that battle in the winter of 2021.
Well, yeah, no, I know. And I haven't seen the other Home Alone.
I watched it.
And that's one of those things where you just like wonder how, you wonder how movies get made. You wonder how bad movies get made. I don't know. It's just enough people in charge need that movie. Like Disney Plus is like, we need that movie. What is it? And then it just snowballs. And so I need to watch the movie before I say if it's any good or not. But I was very pleased with how 8-Bit Christmas did and how it turned out. And I think
you won the war, though. That's the big thing. It was a real David and Goliath story, and you walked away.
I'll take it.
The David and Goliath story of Disney versus HBO.
Yeah.
That's
now we cover like both ends of the spectrum. So I'm curious because we're always looking for new things to watch around Christmas time, and one of ours this past year was 8-Bit Christmas. Do you have anything like more modern that you have been drawn to in recent years?
Wow, that's a good question. Man, a good Christmas movie.
So within the last 5 years, maybe.
Yeah, within the last 5 years. I don't know. I might not.
You can just say 8-Bit Christmas.
Yeah, just 8-Bit Christmas. Just watch 8-Bit Christmas over and over. I mean, I don't know if I do, and that was one of the things. And maybe you guys can recommend some to me. I hadn't seen or what I thought was a modern Christmas classic. I think maybe it was 2005. It was Bad Santa, Elf, and Love Actually. I think that was all 2005, and I love all three of those movies. And I hadn't really loved one since then. So I felt like, maybe it was a good time for 8-Bit Christmas. But man, in the last is there anything you guys really love over the last 5 years?
So the first episode of our show, we covered a brand new Christmas movie at that time. And I've heard very mixed responses from
Yeah.
people who've watched it, but on the whole, the people who like Christmas 365 have almost unanimously written us emails thanking us for telling them about it.
Oh,
There was a Netflix movie called Let It Snow that came out
okay.
in like 2019, and it is basically like Empire Records or Can't Hardly Wait at Christmas time.
Oh,
Like it's
cool.
just it's Christmas Eve, and it's the story of 4 or 5 different kids all trying to go to the same Christmas party,
Oh, cool.
and like the wacky hijinks that ensue in their pursuit to get to that party.
That
Just it
sounds
was
great.
just a feel good, and it's like
Yeah.
what was cool was that there was really no Christmas music in it. It was all like an indie rock soundtrack of like
Yeah.
deep cut songs. So like I can listen to the song. It's nice because I can listen to those songs any time of the year, and low key, it just sounds like I'm listening to indie rock, but in my heart, I'm like, I'm thinking about Christmas.
Oh,
Like,
that's perfect. You're
You're taking, a
under the
page,
cover.
you're taking a
of the
page out
rock.
of my book, Matt.
Yeah.
You're like, this thing makes me think about Christmas. I'm watching the Star Wars movie because it's Christmas time.
That's great. That's great. I'll have to check that out. I mean, I think, I'm sure why you guys love, and maybe you love Christmas for different reasons, but I love it. It just makes everybody better and nicer
Yep.
and happier and kinder. And just, there's just a sense of optimism that sort of permeates the whole month and the build up to it. And that's what was so fun about writing, the book and then the movie, was that I just got to think about that all day. I just got to live in Christmas in my head all day long. So I think that's why people love Christmas. And if you can, make a movie that just sort of captures that a little bit, whether it's not, even if it's just set around Christmas, but not about Christmas, which it sounds like Let It Snow is, you can capture that feeling, which makes great Christmas movies.
Yeah. I think we've said it on the show before, but really Bill Murray's speech at the end of Scrooged, I feel like
Yes.
sums up why I love Christmas so much in so many words, because it's just a speech about like how much better you feel doing good things, and like how like when you really are invested in that Christmas spirit, you're like, well, why would I only do this in December? Like, let me do this all year round. And I've jokingly said, which is a terrible thing for me to say as a person who part of my employment is working at a church, but I've said that Ebenezer Scrooge is more important to Christmas than Jesus in my eyes. Like it represents more of what I think the Christmas spirit actually is, which is like that people can change and be a better person, and that you can like do amazing things in December and then use that to change who you are from January to November as well.
For sure.
Which is kind of what the podcast is about at its core. Like, yeah, it's fun that we're talking about Christmas all year round, but like, it's more just like, hey, like, let's just keep that good feeling that we have from November 1st to December 26th and just like bottle it up and keep it to ourselves and share it for 10 more months. Like,
yeah. Well, that's great. You guys are like a public health service,
I don't like to call myself a hero, but I am. So.
I'll do it.
I do.
I'll do it. You guys are heroes. I like it.
So we'll obviously take the NES off the table here. What was the best Christmas gift you can remember receiving that wasn't a any form of Nintendo? We'll take all of the Nintendos off.
I think probably the best gift, I think I was in 7th grade. My grandfather had passed, 8th grade. My grandfather passed away, and he had a camcorder, and my grandma gave me his camcorder the year after he passed away. And it was just such a cool gift, because I had lots of cousins, so it could have gone to any of them, but it went to me. And, it was very influential on my life. I started making movies and short films and all that because of that gift. So that's probably number one after the old Nintendo.
I think you can put that even above the Nintendo, honestly.
Yeah,
that's
probably.
Talk about two gifts that both really corresponded with where you're at now in your life.
It's a combination. Yeah. What about you guys? What did you get a Nintendo, Matt? Were you of that age?
No. Oh, so I got a Super Nintendo. I was
Nice.
and that was my problem, is that a lot of it bleeds together because I'm a late October baby.
Okay.
So I think I didn't get as many like earth-shattering Christmas gifts as I got. Like, I would get the Super Nintendo for my birthday in October, and then like Christmas I would get a bunch of games to go with it type thing.
Yeah.
So there isn't like a big one, but I had a very close relationship with my grandfather as well. He was kind of what got me into music and cinema and all of that stuff. So I had a similar situation where it was like just my grandmother knowing the closeness that I had and gifting me, like I have his banjo and his first guitar
Oh,
in my
cool.
closet. So it's like
Yeah.
stuff like that. Those sentimental gifts are always going to be the ones that, like, I couldn't tell you what video games I got on what holiday, but I
Yeah.
can tell you, yeah, I remember opening a gift and seeing that it was my grandfather's banjo and like needing a couple minutes to myself because it
Yeah.
was like
Yeah.
overwhelmingly
Yeah.
emotional.
Oh,
How about
that's
you,
good.
Dylan? I think we've
See,
covered this
well,
before, but
yeah, I was gonna say now I jump into being the commercialism side of Christmas, where I'm like, I can tell you what video games I got. Again, being a little younger, I do remember opening my first PlayStation and my N64 on Christmas. I mean, we've talked about like my Christmas morning was spent opening up the games when there wasn't a console coming out, and I would get the new whatever wrestling game was coming out at the time, and I would play that until everybody was ready to head to breakfast. Or I remember in 2008 or 2008, one of those years, the game Bully came out for the PlayStation 2, and I remember playing that. It's one of my favorite Christmas memories. So it's like it's stuff like that. I know I'm leaning less in the like heartfelt side, but more the commercialism side. But I still like, I don't know. These are moments that are still
Yeah.
important to me, man.
no. So I was visiting my brother in Georgia last week,
Yeah.
and he has a PlayStation, and he has all of the old games that we had
Yeah.
when we got our PlayStation, and it did unlock a Christmas memory just now when you were talking about it. But him and I were talking about this too, that my parents got the whole squad of kids a PlayStation one Christmas. Like it was
Yeah.
like, this is for the four of you to share, but they got it so late in the explosion of PlayStation that they couldn't get any games for it just yet. Like the games were just like sold out.
Is it the
So
demo disc?
we
Did you guys
spent
mess with the
a
demo
full
disc?
Christmas morning just playing the one
Yeah.
level available on the demo disc as a squad of four siblings just arguing over whose turn it was to do the one slope from Cool Borders 3 that was on the demo.
Yes.
Or like the starter level in Spyro. Like that's like my Christmas video game memory.
I mean, like gaming to me, it does relate so much to Christmas. One of my favorite Christmases, I had gotten a PlayStation 3, and two of my friends who lived right around the corner from me, all of their like Christmas stuff had been done, and they both came over and we played DJ Hero for 8 hours. And just moments like that where it's like, yeah, it's not as like, this isn't an amazing heartfelt gift, but it was still a gift that brought everyone together.
Yeah.
And I love moments like that. And I think that's kind of the heartfelt message with 8-Bit Christmas as well, is like, yes, there was this underlying goal of getting the Nintendo, but it was about bringing everyone together, and it brought the kids together. We realized that relationship with our main character and his father at the end, and I think that's kind of the message of Christmas as a whole, is just bringing everyone together and just bettering yourself.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And no matter what, like we all have those memories. And I think what's fun about video games is that they're sort of just tied into your senses that way. You know, like if you hear the music from those video games again, you're like right back in there.
Yep.
You know, which is cool.
So one other thing that I think we tackle on a lot of the show, and specifically when we do have guests, I'd like to know, what is any type of Christmas tradition you have? And it can be, specific foods that you eat, or, like, every, like Dylan said, like I will be watching Christmas Story on Christmas Day, like when it's doing its marathon play. Like, what are some of the Christmas traditions that you try to never miss?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me growing, and honestly, like a lot of them are in the book and in the movie. Like I just, spent years thinking about it and putting it in there. And but for us, like my family, we would have the very, very specific set schedule. Every year you have Christmas Eve, Catholic, we'd go to mass. My grandparents, an uncle on my dad's side would come over. we'd have just like dinner there. You wake up in the morning, and then you have Christmas in the morning with just my immediate family. Then we go to Christmas. My dad's side of the family, my grandparents and all the aunts and uncles and cousins would come over there. And then later that night, which is actually in 8-Bit Christmas, we would, for some bizarre reason, we would leave at night to drive at like midnight from Chicago to St. Paul, Minnesota, because there was no traffic. That's when my dad wanted to drive there so that we wouldn't have to. I think to my mom's side of the family, my other set of grandparents and all my aunts and uncles that live in Minnesota. And it wasn't until I was much older with kids of my own, I realized why my dad wanted to leave in the middle of the night on Christmas night, which is just bizarre. It was that because we'd all be asleep and he wouldn't have to deal with us.
Yeah.
We'd just be asleep in the back, and he could just drive for 6 hours and just not have to, talk to us or worry about us or whatever. But I have very specific memories of just like falling asleep in the back in the minivan and, seeing the snow outside in Wisconsin and Minnesota. And we'd have Christmas there. And then years later, we would then go from that Christmas up to 2 hours north to my uncle had a big cabin up there, and we would play pond hockey on the frozen lake. And so it's just all these just very specific sort of a timeline of gathering with family. It was sort of an extended Christmas. It was like 4 days of Christmas. It was glorious.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Well, Kevin, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show. We will absolutely have you back on the show if you'll let us.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
But
absolutely.
In the meantime, as we're all waiting for the big eventual, 16, 32 or 64-bit Christmas, where can people stay up to date with what's going on with you, whether it's books, screenplays, or anything else?
Yeah, I have a website. I don't really update it very often. I probably should. It's kevin-jakubowski.com. You can check that out. You can get the book. If you like the movie, check out the book. There's a lot more in there that I couldn't squeeze into the movie. You can get that on Amazon. And those are the places you can find me. But hopefully, yeah, I'd love to be back again with another movie, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Of course.
Oh, now we won't stop till the big ball drops on New Year's. Happy holiday, have a great holiday, have a merry happy holiday.
Each week on the One Hit Thunder podcast, we welcome a special guest to come take a deep dive into a one-hit wonder artist with us. And together, we decide if that artist brought the one-hit thunder or was nothing more than a one-hit blunder. You can find One Hit Thunder anywhere that you listen to podcasts, so hit that subscribe button and join in on the fun each week.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network. You're listening to the Geekscape Network.